Welcome back to Chords and Queens, the podcast dedicated to highlighting the work of women composers and musicians within classical music. And on today's episode, I'm so excited to be joined by performer and writer and teacher, Dr. Amy Schumaker Bliss. Amy has built a career that seamlessly blends high-level performance with her deep passion for teaching. She's performed with ensembles including the Athena Brass Band, the Kent State Wind Ensemble, the Lancaster Allegro Orchestra, and the San Francisco Brass Band. She's also been a featured artist at the International Women's Brass Conference, and in 2019 released her album Couleurs und Movements, which I highly recommend if you haven't already listened to it. And if that weren't enough, Amy is also a co-host of the New World Brasscast podcast and the author of the children's book Amy's Brass Band, which introduces young readers to the world of British brass bands and inspiring a whole new generation of musicians. With a career as accomplished as Amy's, it would be easy to forget that women in brass music remain widely underrepresented. From the short documentary The Brass Ceiling to articles in Music Teacher magazine asking, where are all the female brass players? It's clear that barriers still exist. That's why I'm so honoured to have Amy with us today to talk about her journey learning the euphonium and playing brass music, the importance of visibility and advocacy, and how we can support more women not only in playing brass instruments but in writing music for them as well. So if you don't mind, let's start at the beginning. So how did your journey into brass music, or even just music, begin?
Right. So I grew up in a family that played brass music. My grandfather played trumpet while he was a student at the Ohio State University. And so he got to college level, and before he was called back to the farm for World War II, of course. But he still continued playing trumpet growing up. And I remember him playing trumpet. He would just disappear and bring back his trumpet and play some Christmas carols or something. So he was what I call a lifelong learner, someone who played throughout my childhood, and I saw that. And so that kind of passed it on to my dad and his brothers, who all played trumpet as well. And so in fifth grade, which is when most American students choose their instrument if they want to join band, it was kind of not even a decision. I was like, I'm playing a brass instrument. I'm playing trumpet. My dad played trumpet. My grandpa played trumpet. And most of my cousins kind of followed suit because their dads, my uncles, played trumpet as well. So a few times growing up, we'd meet together for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and we'd all bring our instruments, and we had a pretty good ensemble going.
Yeah.
And to be honest, my cousin Kelly, we never had a tuba in the ensemble, and my cousin Kelly actually married a tuba player.
Was she marrying, or was she recruiting then at that point?
Right. For the Schumaker ensemble. Right. But I grew up in a musical family, and it never really occurred to me later on that my mom and my aunts played flute. So it was just so much more visible that my dad and uncles and grandpa played trumpet. So I followed. And then in seventh grade, my band director was kind of recruiting for low brass. And I was the pivotal second trumpet player, which is a common chair to move to a different place, because you want to keep your first trumpet player in their spot. But your second trumpet player would guarantee that you have a solid player in the instrument that you switch them to. Mm-hmm. So I was the second trumpet player, and I was asked to play euphonium, and I got this horrible looking, just like probably ancient instrument, and I hated it, and it was heavy, and the case was falling apart, and I went into the band director's office to quit. And I brought my instrument to turn it in and everything. I had the paperwork all ready for the add drop form and everything. And then he looked at me, he goes, well, that's a shame, because I got in this brand new euphonium and I'll have no one to play it. And he opened it up, and you could hear the angels singing. It was like, oh. It was gorgeous. It was silver. It was brand new, still in the packaging. And I was like, well, I guess I can play a little bit longer.
You're like, sure, pull my,
Sure.
twist my arm, yeah.
Right. So here I am, however many years later, still playing euphonium.
That beautiful instrument, it just spoke to you.
Yeah.
And then sort of growing up playing music, were you introduced to any women playing brass instruments, or did you have any role models? I know you said your cousin Kelly was involved, so I guess maybe there was some sort of friendliness there, going like, we're the only two women in the family doing this.
So I was thinking, and I honestly, I don't remember being aware of any women playing low brass around me until at least the end of high school. I had some friends who played low brass instruments, but I wasn't aware of the professionals that were out there. I mean, there were some that were out there, but I didn't know of them. At some point, people started asking, like, who was the first professional, woman professional euphonium player that you met? And my answer to that is usually, like, at some point I just became a professional.
Yeah, which is, I mean, amazing story for you as well, but I think also definitely highlights the world that you were stepping into as well, that you were the first essentially going in these sort of institutions that you were visiting.
Right. I just didn't know. As I said, there are some, and I know them now. I know Laura Lineberger, and I know Gail Robertson, and I know all of these great euphonium players now. But when I was growing up, I really didn't. Yeah. And the thought that came to me was the first woman euphonium player that I met was when I was a junior in high school. I started playing with the university band at a nearby university. And it was kind of like they didn't have quite enough students for the full ensemble, so they accepted some community members in there. And the first euphonium player was a woman named Ruth. Now, I don't know her last name, and I tried to look her up, but I have no way of finding her last name anymore. Those programs are not digital because. Yeah.
Of course, sign of the times.
Right. I can't find her name, but Ruth was a euphonium player, and that was the first time I met a woman who played euphonium, and it made it left a mark on me because Ruth was kind of left by her family, because of two reasons. She told me that she played tennis, and she was apparently very good and at the verge of like possibly going pro. And that was unacceptable. And she played euphonium. She played low brass. Her family didn't want her to play it in band because they didn't have enough money to afford an instrument. So she went there. And at least in the United States, if you can't afford an instrument, you usually play a school instrument, and the school instruments tend to be the bigger instruments that people can't tend to afford anyway. So she got, I think, a trombone and a euphonium, and she excelled at those. So playing tennis and playing euphonium was enough for her family to just say enough. And so she had adopted family, friends who became her family, but her family, besides just kind of her reaching out to say hi every now and then, really didn't have much to do with her anymore.
Wow. Well, yeah. I hope one day your paths cross again, or we find out more about her, because that seems like an interesting story in itself. And then just on that as well, do you remember your first experience sort of playing a piece of music written by a woman?
I don't think I do. I remember the first piece that I do remember is Faustbuch by Elizabeth Raum. And I studied that as I was heading out to grad school. So I'm going to say I hope I hope that was not the first piece by a woman, but that was the first really notable piece that it's a euphonium concerto. It's difficult. It's serious literature. And so that's the first time that it really hit me that I was playing a piece by a woman.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that I played something by women before then, but that was the first time that it really hit me. Oh, this is a woman composer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that very similar story to myself is like you don't realize it, especially when you're playing so much repertoire as a kid and you're learning and growing up, and a lot of songs are traditional or anonymous, and you kind of don't think about it. But yeah, I always asked the question because I remember having that eureka moment when I was like 14 or 15, going, oh my God, this is by a woman. And it's not as if I was saying women could never compose music, but it had never entered my psyche until you sort of
Right.
see a name there and you go, hang on a second, this is really interesting that this is the first time I'm coming across it. And then sort of when did you become aware, or in your sort of world, was there an awareness, or you had maybe enough women that you didn't have to become sort of too aware of this, I hope. But the lack of representation of women composers in brass repertoire, and is there a lack of music written by women for brass instruments, or is it just simply not programmed?
I think realizing that there weren't as many women composers for brass came as a natural realization once I acknowledged that there aren't many women brass players. It was kind of like you notice one thing and you've opened that door of noticing the lack of representation of women in one thing, and then you start seeing it in another, right? Chain reaction. So by the time I was in college, in undergrad, I realized, that there weren't many pieces written by women. But it didn't really occur to me that I'd have any say in the matter or I could do anything about it until I was a good amount older. It was just kind of like, well, this is how it is. But after I kind of grew into my own as a professional, I saw there are organizations and stuff that are trying to encourage more composers now, because I think in the past that there were genuinely few women composers, especially for brass, because brass is seen as a more, quote, masculine instrument, and composing was also seen as, quote, masculine. So you have a double whammy here. So I think that in the past, women were discouraged either I'm trying to think of either consciously or subconsciously from pursuing writing music for brass instruments. But today there are a ton of them, and representation is really really out there. So I think now the push is to serve in ways that will help commission more works from these composers that exist. I mean, the International Women's Brass Conference has a commissions committee that commissions a piece by a woman composer for each conference. And that's a huge commission. That's a $10,000 commission.
Wow.
So that's a major work for a large ensemble. Each time we have a conference, which is amazing. And they recently started the International Women's Brass Conference composition competition, which is such a hard thing to say in a row. But that has started up, and that is we got over 20 works submitted the last time we ran that. And I've got to tell you, we had to discuss for quite some time. I think we had our top 3, and then we had like 2 honorable mentions, because it was just like, how are we supposed to do this? They're so good. The piece that ended up winning is called Level Up by Charlie Drew Johnson. Amazing. It's they managed to capture like the style of video game music. So each movement is like a different kind of video games. It's a video game.
Oh my
God.
God.
And it has electronic accompaniment. So it really sounds like you're in a video game. Yeah, I could see so many undergraduate recitals having this piece.
That's such a unique spin as well on something.
Absolutely. So original. And so, yeah, I think that now there are women writing for the genre, and we just have to support them.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. And you touched on quite an important point as well, is, women weren't always given the opportunity sort of back in the day to write for these huge scale, either brass bands or orchestras. And, it's very, it was almost sort of tolerated that women could be at a piano and, write cute little piano pieces or harpsichord pieces and gorgeous songs. But that's sort of where the composition part of their life ended, for a lot of women. So I think, to your point, it's super important that going forward we support women by listening to their music, but also supporting them as composers and, commissioning new works for greater brass bands and orchestras and giving them that opportunity to write music for the medium. And sort of looking back on your career so far, are there any moments that stand out especially as affirming or discouraging? And were you ever made to feel like you didn't belong in brass music because of your gender? That is quite a loaded question. I'm always aware of that.
I like the bad news first before the good news. So I think I'll start. I'll start. When I was studying euphonium in the UK for my master's, there were band rooms that I was not allowed to enter.
Wow. And just for you, it was just because you were a woman, you felt like you were being sort of discriminated against, that sort of level at that.
Oh yes, yes. I was not allowed into those band rooms, and I remember a woman came from Finland to study with my teacher for a few weeks and observe a whole bunch of brass band rehearsals to just understand rehearsal strategy and technique and conducting style and stuff. And she wasn't allowed to go into those rehearsals because she was a woman as well. And I think that was the maddest I've ever seen my teacher.
Wow.
Calling him out and saying, "This woman came from Finland, and you're going to say that she can't go into your rehearsal room to just observe?" But yeah, that was because there were all male brass bands for quite some time.
Yeah.
So when I was there in 2007, 2008, there were a few that I still couldn't enter. And I mean, today there are more, it's more of just little things that if you blink, you miss them. You know what I mean? Like last weekend, I was in a recording session. We were recording newly published works, so that they can send the recording to band directors and to understand, what the piece sounds like before they purchase it. But I was talking to two men that I don't know who they are because, the other side of the band is the other side of the band. Who knows who's there sometimes? So I was talking to some people, and they were admiring my coworker, the first euphonium, because she has custom red valve caps that are gorgeous. So they were looking at it and they're like, "Oh, it's such a pretty euphonium, and look at the red valve caps." And I said, "Yes, her euphonium is gorgeous, isn't it?" And they stopped and they were like, "It's a she?" And they looked at each other and they looked back at me, and I was like, "Yeah." Like,
Is it?
yeah, yeah. There are two women euphonium players playing together. Yeah.
They're like, my goodness, the shock horror.
Oh,
How did they
goodness.
let it happen? It's like, it's
Right,
crazy.
right. Yeah, just the things like being backstage and having someone tell me that wives and girlfriends need to go out to the house before the show, and I'm like, "Oh,
Oh,
thank you so much. I'll be sure to
I'm the
let them
talent.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll be sure to let them know if I see any.
Oh,
Thank you."
horrible. It's just horrible. And I always remember growing up, and Alison Balsom was the real sort of mega star of brass for
Yeah,
me. And it was always in the news, her revealing outfits and her hair and how she's blonde and she's gorgeous and all of this. And I remember going, because Nicola Benedetti, I'm a violinist, so she was my
yeah,
hero, got
yeah.
it too, but I always thought never to the extent of what Alison Balsom was. And I sometimes wonder if that was because she was so much in that sort of male dominated world of like your brass music feels very protected in that, and people aren't really willing to see women as brass musicians or as composers, and that really rung true to me, was how much rhetoric I was being fed as a teenager even then about like, if you're going to be a performing musician, you have to look a certain way and you have to wear a certain thing in order to be taken seriously, and not one mention of that was about what an incredible performer she was and what an incredible brass player she is. So that was always really interesting for me. But a positive spin, do you have any sort of affirming moments or
Absolutely.
in your career?
Absolutely. I think in terms of affirming experiences, I don't think that anything comes close to playing in Athena Brass Band. It
Really?
is an amazing experience to have 30 plus women and non-binary individuals come from across the planet sometimes and meet up in a room to put together a band is just it's amazing. And we show up and we all fangirl each other. Everyone is, looking at this other person that they really highly admire. And so before rehearsal, it's just all of us coming together and being like, oh my gosh, you're here. I can't wait to play with you. This is unbelievable. And then that person will go to someone else and be like, oh my gosh, it's my dream to play with you. And then that person will go to somebody else and be like, oh my gosh, I heard you in this show and you were amazing. We all really support each other. And I remember in my first rehearsal, I was super nervous. I forget when that was. Maybe right when it might have been right before the pandemic or right after the pandemic. I'm not sure. I think it was right before. And I did something that was rude because we were building up to a climax. And I felt like we like let the dynamic dip down instead of going all the way. And when we stopped playing, I kind of let out a little bit of a sigh. and the conductor, Jessica Sneeringer, was like, Amy, is there something wrong? And I was like, like mortified, absolutely mortified. And she said, because your opinion is important and you have something good to say. And I was like, in that moment, I went through so many emotions because I'm so used to stay quiet, do your thing, don't distract from anything. And to have a conductor say, you have something valuable to say. Do you want to say it? And I said, and I kind of took a deep breath and I said, yes, I think we were heading towards that climax. And I think we let our foot off the gas a bit. And I think it would be better if we really focus on building that up. And she was like, that's an excellent point. Everyone, did you hear that? And I was like, oh my gosh.
Like what a powerful moment as well that's
right.
happened. And because, I wonder if that's because of who she was as a conductor then, because, I've definitely been under the baton of some conductors that wouldn't do that, and very much that sort of monarchical sort of, this is my way or the highway, and you don't want any noise in between the sets. So that's what a beautiful thing to have said as well, and the space that you were in as well amongst all those women.
Right. And so every time I play in that ensemble, it's just such a fantastic experience, and we really do lift each other up. And sometimes we make programming choices because there's someone who we want to highlight. Sometimes we'll play a piece, that nobody has heard because we want to bring that out. And so we played at the RNCM Festival of Brass last year. We played in Mito, Japan. This is truly, and I'll be playing with the Athena Sextet. Sometimes we make like chamber ensembles. So I'll be playing with the Athena Sextet out in Colorado in a few weeks as well. Yeah. So this is an ensemble that is an idea. So it's about 4 brass bands worth of women. And I think about 3 conductors. Yeah. It's 3 conductors and 4 brass bands worth of women. And then each time there's a performance opportunity, we all figure out who's going to be playing that gig.
Yeah, which sounds incredible. Like what an opportunity. And yeah, if anyone's in Colorado and wants to see the beautiful Athena Brass Band, get your tickets now, it sounds like.
We'll be at the Colorado Music Educators Association conference.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. And speaking of teaching, as a teacher who has worked internationally and with a wide range of sort of academic institutions, how intentional are you when it comes to choosing repertoire by women for your students to perform? Is this something you're aware of promoting, or even like, is this an important factor in your teaching?
I think that as a teacher, I try to balance the classics, which honestly are mostly male, because that was how it was, and a student's interests. Sometimes the student is, pulled toward, a certain style, and I try to when I can incorporate a bit more of that style. So I find pieces that are in a certain style a little bit more. Like I had a student who just loved French music, and so when I could, if there was a concept that I needed to teach and I could find a French piece, I would bring it in, and also considering diverse backgrounds, diverse pieces, and I think it's kind of like a balance between those things, trying to consider your student and what they prefer, because if you tell them constantly you will play this, then they're not going to have as much fun, because they're not going to ever get to play the stuff that really drew them to music.
Of course, yeah. It's like a balancing act, isn't it?
It absolutely is, and we have a responsibility as educators to prepare them with the behemoths of the literature. And then also, as I said, considering diverse perspectives, diverse composers. I think this comes into play a lot when I'm guiding my students through programming or recital, trying to balance different perspectives, different composers, different styles. And I think that bringing in composers from minority backgrounds is part of that. They bring a different perspective to the equation. And so I think that it's important to consider all of those things. Yeah. Now, one of the things I was thinking about along the lines of this is when I have the opportunity to serve as a competition chair, I frequently think of myself in terms of an educator and a promoter in that situation, because you're picking these pieces that everyone is going to learn. And so I'm not picking, when I'm a student, when I'm working with an individual student, I'm thinking of what they want to learn and their past pieces that they've played and what we need to work on. But when I'm picking pieces for a whole competition, I'm thinking, I usually try to pick like a classic, and then I also try to pick a piece by a new composer that I think is my way of saying, here, like,
you still do this. This isn't sort of like old men in white hair, wigs, and sort of, this is for everyone.
Absolutely. This is a piece that you should be paying attention to, because I know that composer is going to get an economic boost as well. I've heard that the one competition that I served on, that composer got sold about 100 copies of their solo.
Wow.
So when you choose a piece, because even if the people aren't competing, they'll buy the piece because they're like, oh, this has been chosen for so and so's competition. So pieces like Luminaires by Lucy Pankhurst. I've picked Faustbuch by Elizabeth Raum that I mentioned at the beginning when we were talking. Mouvere, Chris Dickey, Inspired by Blue, Andrea Hobson, Rock Hopper by Gail Robertson, and another one was Waltz in F by Kevin Day. These are all pieces that I've chosen recently for competitions that I've been part of, as like the educator in me that I can't really, the educator in me is like, hey everyone, this is a great piece for you to study, go out and learn that.
Because it's so important. I always think, especially as teachers, it's sort of, you are the trendsetters, if you will. Like it's the music is coming from you sometimes in the beginning, or that sort of pivotal moment where a child is learning an instrument, or like you say, studying for competitions. It's those people that are setting the narrative. So I'm always curious to know what's going through someone's mind when picking that, because sometimes I think, as all of us musicians, I think we go, oh, well, you've got the Bachs, the Beethovens, and the Mozarts, and they're all fabulous. But I think at this point of time, it really intrigues me of going, well, what can we do? Instead of just going, oh, there's no women composers out there, or women never wrote any good music, so it must never exist. It's giving all of the music, it's that same sort of opportunity to have its sort of place in the world and have people learn it. And then just sort of going on to that, how does playing or teaching or programming sort of music by women composers change the conversation in rehearsals or classrooms?
I think it's a subtle change, but I think that it is a way of putting women into a position of leadership and authority, because the conductor is trying to bring her vision to life through this ensemble, right? And so we're thinking, what did she think of when she was writing this? How can we bring her vision to life? What did she want here? What did she want there? And so I think that it's a subtle change, but having a woman in a position of authority is extremely powerful, especially for our girls and young women to see. And in my brass band, my home brass band, we just played a piece by Lucy Pankhurst, and the conductor just mistakenly a few times when we started said, "What do you think he was thinking about here?" And the band had to say, "She." And he was like, "Oh my gosh," because we're so used to having male composers that we have to make this switch. And I think that it's great for, especially in an educational setting when these young musicians are developing, to see a woman in a position of authority, of leadership over, an artistic vision.
Yeah, of course. And for a lot of children, especially like young girls, I can imagine it, if you're not seeing yourself in that sort of composer role or conductor role, it's very hard to then be self-assured and go, what, I'd love to be a composer. I'd love to be a conductor. Absolutely. When you think it's just, potentially just white men that you've been playing and, been under the baton of. So I think that's really important, is just, even if they don't go on to pursue music, is giving them this sort of varied repertoire to build on it and just go, women can do it if they want to. It's not because that they're not as talented or they're not out there, because they are. It's just about giving kids the choice. And then from that, sort of, what advice would you give conductors or educators who want to program more music by women composers but don't know where to start?
It's an intimidating thought, to acknowledge that you want to program more works by women, but come from a background where, at least like in my educational background, when I was training to become a music educator, all the pieces that we studied were by men. They're saying these are the classics, and you get, this discussion of this list, and it's all works by men. So what to do in that case? You have to go out there and you have to put yourself out there and expose yourself to different kinds of music, read up on different composers. I put together kind of a list of some things to read, and some great resources like websites and stuff. So brace yourselves, everyone, because this list is a little long. I have some books that I think are fantastic. There's a book called Voices for Change in the Classical Music Profession, New Ideas for Tackling Inequalities and Exclusions. It's a book that's edited by Anna Boll, Christina Sheriff, and Lauden Nushin. So that's an excellent resource. And then a book called Composing Herself, Women Who Wrote Music Before They Were Allowed to. It's a book by Richard Fleischman. It has a beautiful cover. I just like it.
Wow,
it's
yeah.
I
agree.
So and then kind of on the younger end, I really liked this book called Where Are All the Black Female Composers? The Ultimate Fun Facts Guide. This is wonderfully written by Nathan Holder, is at the reading level of, I would say, 4th or 5th grade reading level. I'm not a reading teacher, but I do have 2 kids, so I'm going to say probably around 4th grade. And so we have wonderful composers in here. Nora Holt, Florence Price, Eva Jesse, tons of
That's what I like to see, just the contents page of women.
Right. It's wonderful. And so those are some books that I would recommend if you want to learn about some more women composers. There are some online resources, and I compiled some that are more brass specific, because that's kind of, where my area is. There's a wonderful blog called It's Not a Trumpet. By a cornet player. And so she has a list of brass band works by women composers. It's growing by the day, practically. The Boulanger Initiative It's a wonderful organization. They offer consulting services. So if you're a band director and you're like, I want to program some more works by women, you can make an appointment and talk with them, and they can help you discover works by women that kind of fit your programming needs, which I think is wonderful. They also have a massive list of pieces written by women and gender marginalized composers. There's the Institute for Composer Diversity, and they put out one of my favorite things that they do each year is they put together the statistics of the Midwest Band and Orchestra Clinic in Chicago. So they put out a kind of a running tally each year of what percentage of the pieces that were programmed are by women composers, which percentage are by LGBTQ composers, et cetera, composers of color. And so they kind of keep tabs on what kind of diversity is being programmed around the country. Of course, there's the International Women's Brass Conference, which I've mentioned several times, and it's an organization that's growing a ton. And I want to mention that the IWBC is for everyone who wants to celebrate women in brass. So we welcome all the men who want to come to the conference. They'll usually play pieces written by women if they play a recital or something. But there are quite a few men at all the conferences, and they're there to learn about women in brass. And the last organization that I wanted to mention is Diversify the Stand. Diversify the Stand commissions marginalized composers to write educational level music. So I have a wonderful book that they put out of a bunch of etudes, accompanied etudes that are written like they're solo quality for anywhere from about middle school through high school. And then they've put out, I think, a trumpet book, a euphonium book. I think they're working on the tuba one. I'm not sure about horn because I honestly haven't checked in on I don't play horn, but they put out these books and they're available for download, or you can buy like a print copy. And I think they're wonderful. So there are tons of resources out there. If you are a band director and you want to put some more, program some more diverse pieces into your programs, including people who you can call up and say, help, and they'll help you.
Yeah, there's literally no excuse. There's so many different options.
Right.
They're all such fantastic resources, and I'll make sure to link all of them that I can as well down in the description for that, because I think phenomenal resources not only for band directors and conductors and musicians, but also for people who want to learn more about just women in classical music. Now, I can't sit here and chat to you without bringing up your fabulous album, Couleurs en Movements, which I hope I'm saying correctly. French with a Scottish accent, I feel like never works that well.
French with an American accent doesn't work either.
Together we'll make it work. It's great. But it features works by Lucy Pankhurst, Elizabeth Raum, and Barbara York. And how important was it for you to feature music written by women on your album?
It's a funny thing. I didn't necessarily set out to have most of the composers of my album be women. I was just working with women who I wanted to work with. I was working with people who I wanted to work with. I had commissioned Lucy Pankhurst to write Luminaires. Mm-hmm. I was a featured artist in the 2017 IWBC conference, and so I wanted to commission a piece for that. So we kind of collaborated on that. And for Luminaires, we wanted it to be, it's a concerto that features a movement about different women. So we wanted to pick the names of women that are not like the most famous women. So I remember we would think about like who she would write a movement about, and then like we'd see where that was going and kind of abandon some because it was like, this idea isn't panning out, you know? And I was super honored because Lucy had wanted to incorporate her ancestor into one of the pieces that she wrote. And so there is an Emmeline Pankhurst movement, which is so cool. The theme for that, for the first theme for that movement is dun, 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 dun. I sang it horribly, sorry. But it's essentially 1918, which is the year that British women won the right to vote.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's why that theme is there.
I love that.
And she programmed, there's a jazzy bluesy section near the end, and that's the American women over across the pond who
Oh my
hadn't quite gotten there yet because we were 1920.
God.
She put so much work into that. So that was commissioned for the 2017 IWBC, and so I was like, well, that's a piece that I need to have on the recording. And then I was part of a consortium for the Barbara York piece. So everything was kind of coming together. I also always wanted to record colors and movements. It was just a piece that really challenged me personally, and I really connected with. And so and nobody knew about it. So I wanted to bring that out. So when I saw that there was a piece with Lucy Pankhurst pieces are named by the woman, but also colors that represent her. And then the Barbara York piece was creative states. And then I saw that, we have we have colors and movements. And then Elizabeth Raum, I love her work, and she has a piece called Chagallien Scenes about Marc Chagall. And so I'm seeing here colors and emotions and kind of all of this kind of coming together. And so that's when I saw, like, this is the theme for the piece. For the album, we're gonna have all pieces about creativity and emotion and music and art and all of these combining. So I it wasn't necessarily that I set out to have so many women composers. I think it was just that I was commissioning and working with the composers that I wanted to highlight. And then at a certain point I stepped back and I was like,
Oops, but what a happy accident. Yeah.
What a happy accident. I was like, this is great. And then I thought to myself, do I want to incorporate more women composers and have it be entirely women? But I was like, I think that that's going to lose my creative vision for what I want the album to be. So it's mostly women, but it's not entirely women. I think it was just, I wanted to highlight the composers that I wanted to highlight in an album.
That's such a beautiful space that you're coming from as well, because it's not a case of you sat down and were like, I'm going to highlight more women in brass. This is where it's coming from. I love that it was just innate. It was just, I want to work with these people because they're great musicians and they have great music, and that's where it's coming from. And I think for me, anyway, that's the dream in life, is that, all performers just go, oh, there's that incredible piece by Lucy Pankhurst. They'll play that. We're not just, here because she's a woman, we'll add this to the piece. So I think that's such a beautiful detail about that album as well, is that it was truly made on passion and musicality. It wasn't just box ticking at that as well, which I think also really highlights the album because it's such a beautiful body of work. And I think also when you listen to it, to me, what's so great, as not being a brass player myself, is you often think of brass as this really bold, dynamic, it's heavy hitting. And what I love about you, and also Alison Balsam as well, is you make it sound lyrical and beautiful and emotional. And I think that's where people need to know more about brass music, or just sort of the general public, in my opinion. There's just like that side of brass exists, and there's a whole world out there. And I think this album's a perfect example of that, for sure. And I also have you to thank for recommending me some fabulous music for brass, which, if you're listening to this podcast and want to hear more of it for yourself, I will link the playlist that I've created for brass music written by women composers in the description. But I bring this up because it's so inspiring to me how passionate you are about sharing your knowledge of brass music written by women with the world. And so how can more people be like you? Is it creating and releasing albums featuring works by women? Is it better programming in the concert halls? Or is it teaching and inspiring the next generation of women in music? Or simply just opening up and sharing your favorite music with other people?
I think it could be all of the above. But I think when I was recommending some pieces to you, because I saw you on Instagram, and I thought, I just couldn't help myself. I for anyone who's listening, I reached out and I just spammed her with.
And I loved it. I was so here for it. I was like, it's almost like the universe knew, because I was like, as a string player, I'm so self-obsessed and will listen to so much string music. And I remember having the thoughts of earlier last year being like, God, I need to have more wind music. I need to have more brass music in my life. And you, like the angel that you were just in my DMs sending me all this amazing music that when I was listening to was going, oh, how have I never heard this? This is gorgeous.
I'm glad that was your response, because I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, this woman's gonna think I'm nuts.
No.
I think that going through that process and trying to find pieces that I knew existed, but I actually had trouble finding recordings of them, professional recordings. I think there are so many YouTube recordings of live performances, but in terms of like professionally recorded, high quality versions of a lot of these pieces, I was surprised when I went on iTunes, when I went on Spotify, when I went on the various sources that you can find different albums. I mean, I sent over to you the Unfortunate Traveler by Imogen Holst. I can't find a recording. This is Holst, Imogen Holst, no recording.
Yeah, which is insane.
Yeah, and Variations by Thea Musgrave, no recording. This is a really notable composer. And I can't find a professional recording of Variations. I can find some stuff on YouTube of live performances, but I think that there's something missing in the that there's a gap there. I think works by women are being performed in the concert hall a bit more now. We're still not, I'd still like to see more, but there are works being performed in the concert hall more now, but they're not being recorded. I think that, that when conductors and music directors are making this choice of where to allocate enormous amounts of resources, because to record an album with a large ensemble does take an enormous amount of resources. So when it comes time for these directors to figure out what they're going to record, they're not choosing women yet. I'm not seeing a lot of these pieces that I wanted to recommend to you, because of course I want to send over a high quality recording.
Yeah. You want people to listen in playlists and go, add this to their faves, and it's crazy.
Absolutely. And I can't find them, so I think that needs to be a priority.
What role do performers and musicians play in advocating for underrepresented composers?
I think as performers, we frequently feel, at least I frequently feel, powerless when I'm a lowly performer. But I do think that occasionally we find ourselves in the room where it happened. We do occasionally find ourselves in these positions to kind of micro influence. When the director or the conductor, says in passing, what do you think about the program? Are you looking forward to the show tonight? And you can do a microdose of influence of, I think that this program is fantastic. This one piece reminds me of this other piece that is just amazing. It would be really cool to play that piece. And he just through little doses. I mean, some of us are on committees and boards and stuff like that where you do have more influence. But as a musician, I think we need to kind of need to kind of put our finger on the scale a little bit, and mention these works that would be fantastic to program. And so I think that it's kind of, you look out for those kind of moments when you can mention these new works that would be fantastic.
And are there any women composers writing for brass that you feel deserve far more attention and programming?
Yes. I think Ingeborg Wilhelmsen is a composer that we should all be paying attention to. Her Cosmographic Mystery was, I heard it at the North American Brass Band Association Championships when San Francisco Brass Band played it, and it is amazing. I think that she is a composer to watch and to pay attention to, definitely. I think Andrea Hobson is on her way up. I've heard a lot of her pieces, and she's getting to the point where I can hear a piece and I'm like, is that Andrea? And Andrea Price, her Ida Deus was a wonderful piece that came out a few years ago, and I really enjoyed that piece. And so I think that Andrea Price is another composer that we should pay attention to.
And I'd also love to talk to you about your wonderful children's book, Amy's Brass Band, which introduces young readers to the world and history of brass bands. Now, growing up, I didn't see many women playing brass instruments, and what I love about this book is that you show people of different backgrounds playing instruments and conducting, and it immediately sends the message that brass bands are for everyone. And how important was that sense of representation and inclusivity to you when creating the book?
That was front and center. That was absolutely. I went to create a book about brass band. I think the words that we used, we wanted to have radical diversity. We wanted to include everyone, and I wanted to make sure that there was absolutely no question that this was not token diversity in a children's book, because that, I think, I should preface this by saying I grew up the child of an educator, and we had over 1,000 children's books in our house.
So you knew what you were doing then when you were writing the children's book
aficionado. So I mean, I knew what I wanted when I was writing the book. I had no clue what to do to write a book, but I figured that out as I went. But when Illustrator and I were talking, we were like, we need to have absolutely radical diversity, and we talked about, how are we going to do this? How are we going to make sure from the get-go? And so we were like, we need a Muslim woman tuba player. That's what we need. So the second page, we have a character with a headscarf on that second page. So that was kind of like, we need to right from the beginning. And I've actually had I've made some friends with some Muslim brass players because they opened that book and they were like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
And if you look at the details in the pictures, I have our solo cornet. I think is it solo or second cornet? I forget. But one of them has leg braces, and that's Malcolm McDuffie from St. Louis Symphony, because he's a polio survivor. So some of the people are actually real people.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Some of them
so
are
beautiful.
Yeah. We also we took a lot of time thinking about the conductor as well. So the conductor is a Black woman in kind of like a African inspired dress. I didn't want her in a suit in the book. I wanted her in a dress, and she has her hair wrapped up and everything. And that was a very purposeful decision, because I thought, who do we need to see more of? Who in classical music? Who do I want to inspire? And so that was another. It's a book full of very purposeful decisions. I mean, I've had some people approach me about in the background of one of the pages, there are two men holding a child's hand crossing the street. And the first time somebody brought it up to me, they said, "Oh, it looks like you made a mistake." And I was like, no. I don't think it's up to me to say who the two men are. Yes. But I think that it's a mistake to call it a mistake, because we have brothers who could be out with a kid. We could have a loving family with two fathers who are out with the kid. We could have a dad and his dad out with the kid.
But I think that's why I love the book is, especially when I was growing up, there wasn't really any of that. It was all sort of like white kids playing or white kids doing something else. So I think when I saw the book, I was like, this is a woman I definitely want to talk to, because she knows what's up. Like, this is so inspiring, even just because I think it just restructures the narrative of classical music. And I think that's the most important thing to do for the next generation of classical musicians, is to go, doesn't matter what you look like, doesn't matter what your background is, music is a space for you, and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. And your book is a beautiful representation of that. So I very much you have a fan in me. I love it so much. And then so once a young girl has picked up this book and read it and loved it, and she's considering playing a brass instrument or wondering if they belong amongst the brass section, what would you want this sort of young girl to hear?
I think I want her to hear me telling them to just do it.
Yeah. That's a very teacher thing to say as well. Like, just do it.
Yeah. I think today we have so many resources online. We're so connected in ways that when I was starting out, we weren't. And when I was starting out, it felt like if I was the only girl in the trumpet studio. And then, I mean, the only other things you would see famous people, and you would see maybe a few kids from other area schools. That's what I would see. But today, you can go online and you can look up all of these different performers. You can find women professional brass players and listen to them. We have, you know, the IWBC's mentorship program. It runs every year and there's no age limit. It's for women and non-binary brass players. So if you're out there and you're playing a brass instrument and you're like, I feel like I'm the only one and I don't feel like I'm being supported and stuff, then you know, sign up for that, and then you have a mentor to speak to find that support. But there are groups on Facebook, the women's I think it's like the women female non-binary brass players, something like that. I mean, if you search for it, you'll find it. But it's a wonderful support group. There's brass moms. None of these existed when I was growing up. I mean, when I was pregnant, I don't think I knew any brass player who had a kid. I just had to trust biology and be like, I know I'm going to be fine, you know, but how long is it going to take? I don't know how long it's going to take to get back to playing. I don't know.
Which is insane. Yeah, I remember a recent article, I think, in the BBC Music magazine came out about this, kind of just highlighting, especially maternity in orchestras. But that was specifically a question as well for brass and wind players, was they just have no idea and no one knows. There's it's very sort of just like, and people are so scared to keep their jobs as well, like in these very high profile orchestras. They don't want to be seen as complaining, or, you know, if you've had C-sections or any kind of major trauma, how are you expected to sort of then play an instrument of that demands so much as well? So that can be a whole podcast episode on itself about that. But yeah, I think to your point as well, it's so amazing that people like you exist on the internet and in the world to support that, but also that there are these phenomenal resources for women entering into the world of brass to hopefully feel as supported as they can be. And then, is there any one thing that we can all do to support women composers and performers in the brass world right now?
I think, you know, for composers, we just need to keep programming their works and making others aware of them, talking to the people who are in the positions of power who are setting the program, and publicize pieces. Even if it's, you know, you go to a concert and you think that it's a fantastic piece and you've never heard it before, grab a link to it on YouTube or mention it, you know, in a band directors group or something, and be like, this needs to be programmed. So if we keep talking about it, because remember, the default is to fall back on the pieces that we've learned, you know, as kids, and the pieces that we've highlighted in our classes becoming music educators. So we need to keep highlighting these pieces that are great when we hear them, so that those band directors can know of them and then program them. And I think in terms of the performers, I think we need to evaluate the way that we're finding new performers for our ensembles, because so frequently people hire the people that they know, and men disproportionately hire men, because that's kind of who's in their social circle and stuff. So if we're in the positions of putting our input into hiring, we need to evaluate, how are we finding the people that we're going to hire? Because I know in freelance world, you're not always auditioning. Sometimes it's just like, we need someone for this spot who knows someone who would be great for it. So gather more opinions. Gather opinions from people who are, you know, who might have a wider reach, and to find more diverse people to bring in. And when you hire, when the whole ensemble, there are a few cases, you know, you see online, and the whole ensemble looks exactly alike, and you're like, maybe you should reevaluate how you're thinking about your hiring, because the whole of classical music does not look like that.
This. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, just to wrap up the podcast, my final question, but sometimes the most difficult: what is your favorite piece of music written by a woman, and why is it your favorite piece?
It's such a loaded question.
It is, isn't it? It's the hardest one.
So I planned my answer to this ahead of time, because I was like, I can't answer, because I have a lot of favorites, and it changes too. And I have so many composer friends that if I say just one, they're going to be like, oh, I see how it is. But I want to mention that after finding you on Instagram, I found and purchased Esther Abrami's album Women, and I've listened to it a ton lately. I love it. I think it's a great album. And so that's what I'm going to say, because that's what I'm listening to a lot of these days. So thank you for your 365 days of women composers, because it helped me find a new piece that I love listening to.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and that album is great. If anyone's listening and hasn't checked it out yet, it's amazing. And with that, thank you so much, Amy, for your time today. Where can people find you, and where's best to sort of, have you got any projects coming up? What can people do if they want more Amy?
If you want more Amy.
You want more Amy.
I'm pretty searchable online, Amy Schumaker Bliss. And so I'm on Instagram, Amy S Bliss. And a quick Google search will find my website as well. That's amybliss.net. But yeah, I'm pretty searchable as Amy Schumaker Bliss. You can find my podcast, New World Brasscast, on most podcast streaming services.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much for your time. This has been such an insightful episode, and I've loved getting to chat to you. So until then, everyone, I'll see you again next week.